Welcome to the Chosen Ones. How the heck are they still alive? A query spoken by sorcerers who have tried everything and failed terribly. Some individuals survive automobile accidents. Some people withstand heartbreak. However, they were picked. You survived spiritual assassination attempts that were specifically meant to remove you from existence. And not just once, not just twice. We're talking about ritual after ritual, attack after assault, all organized like spiritual airstrikes. And yet, you're surfing through YouTube, beaming like holy Wi-Fi in human flesh. Let us be honest. You are not intended to be here. Not with what they threw to you. Not after the psychic assaults, demonic contracts, and mysterious family members that smiled during the day, but chanted at night. You were targeted, ridiculed, and analyzed like a scientific experiment beneath the moonlight. And when the black magic didn't kill you, they began to ask the only logical question. What kind of monster is this? This is a cold, hard reality. In many ancient occult systems, surviving 3 or more direct psychic murder attempts qualifies a chosen one for divine class protection. This implies that the worlds themselves get interested in your protection. Portals shut for your opponents. Karma accelerates, and heavenly monitoring surrounds your soul like titanium armor. That's not simply surviving, it's classified. So brace up, because this film isn't only about resilience. We're looking into why dark sorcerers couldn't kill you, why their spells detonated midair, and why you. Yes, you are living evidence that miracles occur and black magic has its limitations. And just a caution. If any evil creature is listening right now, they should take a notebook and some holy water. Let we begin. Number 1, they did not only assault your body. They attempted to unripen your spirit. They didn't just wish to harm you. They intended to completely eliminate you. So, first and foremost, most individuals do not understand this. This wasn't only about damaging your career, health, or relationships. Those were just diversions. What was truly going on behind the scenes was a spiritual assassination attempt. Dark sorcerers, energy manipulators, and mysterious forces were attempting to alter your spiritual DNA, not only killing your body, but also destroying your existence from the ground up. They wanted to make sure your light never showed up here in the first place. This goes deeper than witchcraft. It's cosmic warfare. They attacked your identity, essence, and position in the divine order. They attempted to silence you in the spiritual world. You weren't just someone they sought to quiet. You were someone they wished to remove from all levels of existence. Their goal was more than simply to take you out. It was intended to make it seem as if you had never been here. That's why so much of your suffering seemed like confusion, like unseen assaults. You couldn't explain to anybody since it wasn't just psychological. It was full of energy. It was encoded. But you're still standing because your soul arrived here encased by something they couldn't reach. They tried rituals, blood names, dates, and lunar phases, but nothing stuck. Every time they thought they had you, something happened. A delay, disturbance, or breakdown in their altar. They do not grasp it. But you were surrounded by spiritual fire the whole while they attempted to match your frequency, but were unable to do so without short-circuiting themselves. Your survival was more than simply a miracle. It was a malfunction in their system. You breached the rules. They believed they were absolute. And now they are surprised, perplexed, and afraid, asking a question they never thought to ask. How come they are still alive? Because according to their calculations, you were meant to be long gone. But you're here, your whole breathing flashing even brighter, and they have no clue what to do about it. Number 2. Your birth ended a curse that was supposed to endure generations. You were never merely born. You have been sent. And from the time you arrived in this world, you broke a generational curse that had been resting on your family line like a parasite. That curse was not arbitrary. It was planted. Someone did something terrible a long time ago. We made an agreement. After performing a ceremony and activating a blood oath, everyone who followed was confined in a spiritual cage. That prison resembled cycles of poverty, addiction, illness, betrayal, premature death, and mental breakdowns. It seemed like ordinary misfortune, but it wasn't. It was spiritual debt with interest. Then you showed up. The energy moved. The cycle began to break without reason. What used to wreck others in your lineage did not affect you in the same manner. You may have gone through hell, but unlike them, you did not drown in it. You questioned things no one else has ventured to. You rejected the dysfunction. You've observed trends. You began praying in a manner that your forefathers never did. You went deeper. You moved differently. And that's when the spiritual sirens rang. The dark forces in your ancestry saw you as a menace, not because you were flawless, but because you remembered. You transported codes that did not originate from this realm. And whether you realized it or not, you are late. Begin burning contracts that were signed decades or even millennia before your existence. That is why your life became so difficult so quickly. That's why you felt like you were always monitored. Because the curse breaker had joined the bloodline, darkness scrambled to contain you. They expected you to be exhausted, devastated, and lost to make a difference. But each time they knocked you down, you got back up. Something in you snapped back harder. You surviving was more than simply survival. It was disruption. You were the system malfunction in a long series of programmed misery. And even if no one in your family ever admits it, your sheer presence stopped a curse that would have consumed them all. This is why they worked so hard to ruin you. You are the one they did not see coming. Number 3, the attempted murders occurred after a failed spirit assassination. Before they tried to harm your life in the physical world, they pursued you in the spiritual realm. The initial strikes did not appear as automobile accidents or betrayals. They appeared in your sleep, in your energies, and in the quiet times when your soul was being assaulted behind the scenes. Most people are unaware that assassination attempts do not necessarily begin with knives or poison for the targeted individuals. The initial conflict is unseen and cruel. Your dreams were never simply that. These were battlegrounds. You'd wake up feeling like you hadn't slept, as if something evil had touched you. But you could not explain it. You felt exhausted for no reason. You lost time. You felt a thick fog about you some days. These were not mood swings. It was spiritual battle. They attempted to infiltrate your head while you were asleep, expecting that your defenses would be compromised. They sent spirits, creatures, and shadows to weaken your soul before you knew you were at war. They planned to wear you down spiritually so that when the physical assaults arrived, such as abuse, rejection, poverty, and turmoil, you would be too exhausted to fight back. They believed that if they caught you early in the spirit, they might influence how your life would turn out. But you made it through the opening rounds. That's when they panicked. Because when spiritual assaults fail, they must advance into the natural realm. The treachery began to manifest itself at this point. That's when the losses occurred. That's when everything began to come apart around you. Not by chance, but by plan. You were not insane. You were not weak. You were under spiritual observation. You were resisting something. You didn't even know the language at the time. And every time you got back up, every time you continued pushing, praying, and developing, they realized they had lost control. The reality is, you won some of your most important battles before anybody watched the conflict. That is why they are so upset. You defeated them before you even realized who you were. And now they're coping with the fallout from a botched spiritual attack on someone they should never have gone for in the first place. Number 4, you were designated as impossible to kill in realms that humans cannot comprehend. You were not only protected, you were registered long before you could take your first breath. Your essence was marked in realms beyond human comprehension. These are not locations that can be Googled or mapped. Human language cannot exist in these dimensions due to their tremendous frequency. And in such areas, your name is not mentioned. It shines not because you are unique in any manner, but because your role here on Earth has been legally acknowledged by the greatest spiritual court in existence. You didn't just show up. You were approved. This is why nothing they threw at you functioned as intended. Every assault, ritual, every effort to imprison your soul resulted in collapse. Not because they were untrained, but because they were breaking a universal rule. You do not tamper with what has been sealed by Source. But black sorcerers, motivated by ego and despair, continued attempting to bypass your barrier. They interfered with the chronology. They uttered prohibited names. They attempted to steal your destiny by energetic frauds. And every time they did, it backfired terribly. Several of them went mad. Others were ill out of nowhere. Some people lost authority, reputation, and even their own safety. Because when they came for you, they were not only violating spiritual law, they were disrupting a heavenly appointment. You were not put here at random. You carry something holy, and that sanctity is built into the fundamental fabric of existence. That's why you're difficult to kill. Not because you are invincible, but because touching you means ruin. They learned this the hard way every time they attempted to change your conclusion. They sparked a reaction that almost consumed them. That's why so many of them finally retreated in quiet. Not because they were merciful, but because they understood too late. They were battling a presence that even darkness had been told to avoid. Number 5, they didn't realize your agony was a live barrier. They felt that by breaking you, they would be able to destroy you more easily. But the exact reverse occurred. Every instant of anguish you felt was a result of something they did not expect. It was protecting your soul with fire. Each betrayal represented a layer. Each abandonment was an improvement. Every grief became an encryption. Your suffering did not merely affect you emotionally. It affected you energetically, not in a fluffy feel-good manner, but in a truly spiritual, completely impenetrable way. They couldn't understand that certain amounts of anguish unleashed divine technology. Yes, it stung. Yes, it almost killed you. However, something holy was occurring under the surface. Your energy was becoming toughened to frequencies that curses cannot grasp. Demonic systems are based on openings, bitterness, fury, fear, and confusion. But what happens if you survive? Enough torment to conquer all of those feelings and transform them into power? What occurs is that they cannot discover an entrance point. They attempted to assault your psyche, but you had already endured years of mental anguish and made peace with your wounds. They attempted to communicate via your emotions, but you had already cried, mourned, and healed in solitude. They attempted to entice you into turmoil, but you had already learnt to thrive in it. You've previously dealt with and outgrown every method they utilize. This is what made you untouchable. Not perfection, but preparation through hardship. What they didn't comprehend was that by attempting to destroy you, they were really strengthening you. Every loss was divinely designed. Every collapse was part of your design. Praise did not make your aura more strong. It was created during conflict. And now, when they attempt to send things your way, they are met by a firewall formed of your history, sorrow, and progress. And no matter how many rituals or names they sing, it will never work since your sorrow has already burnt the bridge they intended to cross. They don't comprehend how you're still here and increasing. It's because your wounds haven't simply healed. They became your protection. Number 6, you were reborn without dying. You didn't have to lie flat on a hospital bed to experience resurrection. Your rebirth didn't include flowers or spectacular tales. It came via a tremendous agony that shattered your soul into bits. And yet you return whole. That is not luck. That is spiritual resurrection. Chosen ones do not need physical death to undergo change. What you went through was even more serious. You were buried in emotional and energy graves of sadness, solitude, betrayal, and identity loss before clawing your way back up with only willpower and heavenly protection. Most individuals do not survive this kind of internal death. They get trapped in the underworld of their own thoughts. They get lost in their misery. But you didn't. You went far into the darkness, roamed through places that robbed people of their sanity, and returned with something more powerful than hope. You conveyed knowledge. That's why your presence seems archaic. That is why your energy makes others uneasy, even if they do not understand why. You bear the burden of someone who died and returned without ever having a burial. There were times when your soul was so disconnected from your body that it didn't seem real. You were floating, unconnected, seeing your life unravel from the outside in. But rather of giving in to the nothingness, you battled for your soul. Every time you choose to remain grounded, breathe, and move, you had every reason to let go. You were giving birth to yourself over and again. That explains why you walk like if you've seen too much. Because you did. That is why no spell, hex, or evil eye can cling to you, since you are no longer working at the same spiritual density as before. They are still casting for the version of you that died years ago. What's walking about today has been revived, calibrated, and is completely conscious. You became the thing they dreaded the most. Someone who cannot be murdered since they have previously lived. What should have happened to you? Number 7. You survived because you were deployed after the conflict started. You were not late for the war. You were perfectly timed for it before you ever arrived. The conflict was already underway. Darkness had taken root. Hexes were operating. Generations were crumbling beneath the weight of demonic assaults. It seemed like the enemy was gaining, particularly because most people were unaware there was a conflict. The injury was so commonplace that it was mistaken for life. Spiritual contracts, karmic obligations, and ancestral bondage were causing whole lineages to collapse. That is precisely when you were sent. You weren't born in peace. You were born amid a crisis. But not by chance. Your entrance was a divine tactic. You are not merely a survivor. You are a heavenly countermeasure. Your soul was permitted to appear only when the adversary believed it had everything under control. And you entered programmed with something that darkness could not copy. Divine disturbance. This is why your presence disturbs certain individuals. That's why some people despised you before you even talked. Your vitality did not come to blend in. It interrupted you just as you were waking up. It was hardly a gentle awakening. It was a detonation. Every monster that had become used to feeding on your family line, surroundings, and community felt suddenly threatened. You did not have to do anything dramatic. Your knowledge alone started to dismantle strongholds. It's only your choice to heal, to break habits, and to avoid repeating the cycles. That alone caused terror in the invisible world. They believed they had everything under control. They had individuals stuck in soul bonds, addictions, uncertainty, and self-hatred. Then you showed up. Not naive, but raw. Not flawless, but anointed. And each stride you've made since has challenged years, if not millennia, of spiritual activity. You survived not because life made things easy for you, but because you were designed to fight. Sent as a response, not a question. You were not late. You were exactly on time. That is why everything in darkness attempted to stop you the minute you started to ascend. Number 8. Your aura is interwoven with codes that they cannot read or destroy. They saw you as simply another prey, another body, another soul to capture, curse, or control. But once they focused in on you, they understood something was wrong. You did not reply like the others. Their typical approaches were ineffective. The spell would not finish. The ritual has a malfunction. Their energy bounced back, jumbled, or completely dissipated. What they were attempting to tap into was not only spiritually protected, it was encrypted. Your aura is filled with codes that only the source recognizes, let alone understands. Everything in your energy field is programmed for divine intervention. You did not inherit light from your parents. You were born with spiritual barriers. It's why they could never figure you out, no matter how many readings, altars, or chants they employed. They attempted utilizing your name, picture, and possessions. But nothing worked since your energy does not travel at a consistent rate. It bends, conceals, and adapts. It understands when to expose and when to withhold. And more significantly, it sends everything back to the source in real time. The spells they attempted to cast needed clarity and access. However, your aura scrambles access like heavenly static. Their tools become faulty. Their altars get chilly. Some people become ill just by attempting to tap in. You are not merely protected. You're spiritually imprisoned. The codes in your energy were set there not merely to protect you, but also to corrupt everything that attempts to challenge your spiritual authority. That is why some of them were confused, exhausted, or even curse themselves. They unintentionally sparked a heavenly alarm. This is why your energy motivates others to either defend or destroy you. They sense something old, unreadable, which either humbles or infuriates them. However, they cannot control you since your spiritual technology is well beyond their grasp. They speak spells, but your code does not understand them. They light candles, but your aura obstructs the blaze. You aren't indestructible because you are untouchable. You are indestructible because your blueprint was created in a language only the Creator understands. Number 9. You succeeded because you were the curse breaker. They thought you were not intended to figure it out. The objective was to keep you confused, distracted, numb, and too damaged to connect the connections. You were destined to be just another person trapped in the circle, repeating the same trauma cycles, bearing the same emotional scars, and making the same spiritually costly choices that kept the curse alive. But something in you began to awaken gently, then furiously. And that was when everything changed. You began to see patterns, bizarre repeated disasters, old emotional traps camouflaged as other persons, and generational addictions disguised as just being ourselves. You questioned it rather than normalizing it like many who came before you. That alone broke the foundation. Then you moved on. You prayed differently. You stopped engaging in rites that seemed to be traditional but were really bondage. You ended partnerships that were spiritually structured to deplete you. You said no when you were taught to remain quiet. You stepped away when guilt sought to keep you stuck in dysfunction. That is what made you dangerous. Because every time you said no, a spiritual circuit blew. Every time you said the name that bears true power without compromise, without mingling evil and light, you reversed years, if not centuries, of demonic programming, not just for yourself, but for your whole lineage. What you believed was a personal limit turned out to be a spiritual revolt against powers that had ruled your family for centuries. They were not prepared for it. You became the only thing. Dark systems cannot have a reversal point. Everything that used to flow towards destruction began to flow in the other direction as soon as your spirit linked with truth. What used to attach to you has ceased functioning. What haunted your family in the past? I can't locate you anymore. And what used to circulate in your blood has nowhere to go. This was exactly what they dreaded. Not because you are loud, not because you are showy, but because you quietly accomplished the impossible. You have broken the spell. A curse that is severed at the root cannot regenerate. Number 10. Your divine contracts rendered their blood pacts invalid. They tried all they could to capture you. Ceremonies, offerings, sacrifices, vows spoken in secrecy, and names inscribed in blood. All of this is intended to tie your spirit to demonic agreements that you never signed. They attempted to put you in spiritual debt, as if your soul could be purchased or borrowed. Their purpose was to make you a prisoner without chains, to bind your fate to evil powers by manipulation, terror, and ancestral gaps. And for a time, it may have seemed to be working. Everything kept going wrong. You felt weighty without a cause. Cycles would not break. The resistance was relentless. However, they never calculated. They utterly forgot the heavenly bargain that preceded all of their rites. Before taking your first breath, your soul was sealed by the Most High. That commitment outranked every altar they built. It nullified all blood pacts, soul ties, generational curses, and astral agreements. Not just spiritually, but legally. Contracts are important in the spiritual sphere. Authority is important. Your authorization has been signed by the highest court. That's why their efforts were never lasting. They may have created delays, uncertainty, and mayhem for a while, but nothing they did could change what heaven had already decreed. Every time they attempted to reinforce their rituals, the outcomes failed. The doors they shoved open slammed shut. They set bindings all around. Your name disintegrated because you were not under their control. You never were. You were functioning with heavenly immunity, even when you didn't realize it. And when you eventually woke up, began praying with insight, and walked in your authority, their spiritual economy crumbled. Everything they spent to keep you down was immediately devalued. The sacrifices were rejected, the pledges were violated, and the blood used was negated. You were shielded by something they couldn't undo. A contract drafted in light, signed by truth, and supported by eternity. That is why you are still here. Not because they didn't strive hard enough, but because your soul belongs to something or someone over which they have no authority. A number. The strikes did not miss. They failed. Don't be fooled by the peace you feel right now. Fool anybody. They definitely come for you. The assaults were genuine. They were not imagined. They weren't merely negative emotions or harmful individuals. You were put on altars. Your name was shouted throughout ceremonies. Objects that belonged to you were buried, burnt, or sealed in jars. You were the center of intense spiritual warfare aimed at stopping you. Break. You may either confuse or kill yourself. The proof is not always evident, but the spiritual harm they intended to create was deliberate and wicked. The lie they want you to believe is that nothing occurred, that no one targeted you, and that was all in your mind. However, the assaults were successful. They just didn't work. That's a key distinction. The rites were complete. Curses were unleashed. The forecasts were delivered. But they didn't account for how your energies would react. You were not only protected, you were created to reverse the energy. Your frequency was not passive. It was reactive. And it didn't only disable their systems. It overwhelmed and broke them from the inside. Some of those who targeted you faced such terrible penalties that they had to remain quiet. They couldn't understand the abrupt illness, mental breakdown, and losses in their personal life. Some have yet to recuperate, and they never will, because you are not just spiritually shielded. Heaven weaponized you. Your aura embodies divine law. Anything that tries to bind it unlawfully will ultimately get bound by it. That is not superstition. That is cause and effect in the spiritual realm. So don't allow anybody fool you into believing they never assaulted. They did. They were also sure about it. Until your energy started doing what it was intended to accomplish. Return the storm to the sender. Not out of revenge, but in accordance with spiritual principles. What they didn't realize was that every time they aimed at you, they were really drawing the trigger on themselves. Not a single assault was disregarded. No one went overlooked. The strikes did not miss. They just sparked divine retribution. A number. You are alive because you choose to bleed for light. You are not alive now because life granted you compassion. You are alive because you made a spiritual commitment to shoulder a weight. Most individuals would collapse. You didn't just endure a few difficult years. You went through a soul-level battle. This is the part that no one wants to utter out. You agreed on it. Not in this lifetime, but before it. On a spiritual level, you agreed to a task that included hardship, seclusion, sacrifice, and fire. You committed to bleed for the light, not because you are superior, but because your spirit was designed for it. The expense has been exorbitant. You lost folks you believed you'd be riding with forever. You saw relationships deteriorate, often violently, for reasons you couldn't understand. Your health may have suffered a hit. Your mind has been assaulted. Your heart has broken more times than you can count. You walked about in uncertainty, wondering if you had done anything wrong, when in fact you were walking through heavenly fire. You weren't condemned, but rather selected to carry something pure through a poisoned world. Most people just see the outside section, which is where you are still standing. They do not see the nights. You almost gave up the days when you went through spiritual darkness so dense that it seemed like drowning. They have no idea how many times you have to rebuild yourself from the ground up alone. No blueprint, no praise, just grit, faithfulness, and heavenly power, keeping your soul together when everything else fell apart. Your survival is not random. It's proof of your willingness to embody something greater than yourself. You committed to bring light into locations where most people would never go. Yes, it comes at a cost, but it also provides power. You now carry a frequency that cannot be faked, bought, or replicated, a strength purchased in quiet, bloodshed, and spiritual suffering. That is why you are alive. Not because you had it easy, but because you ran out of money and refused to give up. Because light need a body. And you said yes. The number is there. Black magic turned on them. Middle ritual. They did not just fail to take you out. They were compensated for their efforts. What they put forth did not just vanish into the air. It turned around mid-ritual and returned with a fury. That was the part they didn't see coming. They believed they could manage the energy. They believed they could control the ghosts. However, when they said your name with malevolent intent, they activated a spiritual clause. They were completely unaware of their existence. Because you are marked by divine law, each assault on you is instantly assessed in real time. Some of them started routines with confidence and composure until things went wrong. Candles would not ignite. Sacred artifacts snapped, and shadows in the room moved in ways they couldn't understand. What they summoned didn't obey the beings they attempted to command. I turned on them. Why? Because insulting someone under divine protection puts the sender at danger of spiritual repercussions. You are not just protected. You are spiritually reflective. Your energy functions like a mirror. Whatever is hurled at you, if it is unlawful in the divine world, will bounce back by default. That's why some of these folks became ill unexpectedly. Lost employment, mental breakdowns, and paranormal harassment. It wasn't a coincidence. There were repercussions. Some people lost their spiritual standing in the evil world since they were unable to bring you down. They underestimate your coverage. They had no idea your aura had stipulations tied to it. The phrase, "touch, not my anointed," was not lyrical. It was a warning. You did not need to fight back with spells. You didn't need vengeance. Your enthusiasm did the job. Your affiliation with the source became their curse. And when the darkness they called arrived in search of you but was unable to find you, it turned back to seek payment. And since they were the messenger, they became the sacrifice. That is not superstition. That's the law. You are a living example of divine order. They learned the hard way that messing with you is never worth it. A number. You are not merely a survivor. You are divinely immune. You're not here because you were fortunate. You're here because you exist. They were unable to control the disturbance. You didn't just endure the storm. They couldn't even infect you as planned. You carry something. They could not calculate divine immunity. Your simple existence disrupts their calculations. They have attempted to forecast your demise, influence your destiny, and stifle your voice. But none of it has stuck. Why? Because you were not designed to comply. You were designed to intervene. The fact is that your presence serves as a spiritual antidote, while others are spiritually deceived, stuck, or damaged. When you step in, the system begins glitching. That's why some people never liked you. That's why dark energy flinched when you entered the room. You exemplify exactly what spiritual oppressors despise, someone who cannot be controlled. Your soul does not deal with darkness. Your frequency repels what others are attracted to. You don't just break curses. You reveal the mechanism underlying them. That's what makes you so hazardous to their plans. You're not the only one who got away. You are the one who cracked the script. You melted generational patterns, broke ancestral ties, and refused to be manipulated by pain again. You did not merely heal. You become a threat to spiritual systems based on deception, abuse, and delusion. The exact areas they attempted to bury you are now where your vitality reigns. Your survival was not passive. It was heavenly resistance. Every world that attempted to suppress you now utters your name with fear. Not because you are arrogant, but because you are energized. Our evidence that a soul committed to divine mission is unstoppable. That not all selected ones are consumed. That's some rise from the ashes. Not only did they survive, but they were also armed. You were not sent to fit in. You were instructed to interrupt. Everything that formerly flourished in darkness now panics because you're still alive, ascending, and impervious. You were not only targeted. You were chased not because you were weak, but because you were dangerously alive in a culture that values spiritual death. They attempted to erase, tie, curse, and silence you. But you could not be undone. Why? Because your being is a deal with the divine. Blood rituals, demonic altars, and generational bondage do not break this pact. You didn't just survive black sorcery. You revealed it. You did not just walk through spiritual fire. You become the fire. Every assault that was intended to end exposed who you really are. A weapon of light encrypted by heaven and unstoppable by hell. You were tagged as untouchable. Assignment, not ego. You weren't here to play it safe. You were tasked with dismantling institutions, reversing lineages, and challenging realms assumed to be impenetrable. And without raising a finger in retaliation, you became the only power of darkness. Couldn't decode, override, or break. You are not a mistake. You are not broken. You aren't late. You're a living defiance of every system of spiritual control ever devised. Your scars are sacred. Your grief was holy. Technology. Your presence alters atmospheres and dissolves demonic contracts on sight. You are live evidence that divine protection exists. It is dominant. You didn't just endure them. You outlasted the whole playbook. So, if you've ever wondered why your life has been so intense, difficult, and unexplained, remember this. You were not just born into a conflict. You were born in reaction to it. And the fact that you are still standing, shining, and selected demonstrates more than just perseverance. It proves that heaven always has the final say. If this message resonated with you and reaffirmed your deepest belief that you are chosen and divinely protected, don't scroll away. Subscribe to the channel now. This area is for soldiers like you. Those who have gone through hell and come out sparkling. I like this video. If you know anything, survival was not a chance event, but rather a divine plan. Comment below. I'm still here by divine command. If you're walking evidence that no weapon made against you has succeeded, share this with another selected individual who needs to be reminded. They are not insane. They're covered. Let's awaken more spirits. Let's change the environment. Let's make the enemies regret ever coming after us. God bless you.